Drew Tucker, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been long overdue, very excited. And just for people that aren't aware of you, do you mind giving us a little backstory, where you're from, where you grew up, and how you got into music?
Sure. I don't know if that's a little backstory, but I'm from South Florida. I was born in Plantation, Florida, raised mostly in between Boca Raton and Delray Beach. Spent most of my adult life in Delray Beach. I married with two pretty cool daughters, and I'm also the youngest child of five, and my older siblings are way older. They're like 14 years older, 15 years older, 18 years older, 19 years older. And they're not half siblings, they're full siblings. I was just a surprise in my parents. I guess, I was a surprise. I don't know how else to put it. But,
They
but
were
they,
seasoned vets by the time you came around.
right, exactly. So, what's interesting about that and why I bring that up is because by the time all my brothers had done piano lessons and drum lessons. I think my sister was a piano player. My oldest brother was a drummer, then guitar player, then saxophone and accordion player. The next brother, youngest to me. And by the time that I had come around, they had all been allowed to quit. They had all complained their way out of music lessons, and yeah. And by the time I had come around, they were old enough to regret it. So they told my mother, like, listen, he's gonna complain like we did. Just don't let him quit. Like, just whatever you do, don't let him quit. So my mom didn't let me quit. So I complained through piano lessons. I started piano at 4, and then I kept going with piano all the way until middle school. At which point they didn't have a piano option in middle school. So and at that point I had acquiesced, right? So I'm like, all right, I play the piano, I guess. But I was never like, I don't think I'd ever gotten past playing like pop tunes. It was something that I enjoyed, but I wasn't into, and my parents weren't musicians, so they didn't really know that I wasn't practicing. I was just killing time. So when I got into middle school,
Oh, I know all about that.
yeah, exactly. So when I got into middle school, I was doing I went for the fittings, and I said, okay, you don't have piano. What about saxophone? And they said, no, we have enough saxophones all filled up. So I said, all right. And they said, well, hey, you said you play piano. Can you read? Can you find these notes on the bell kit? And I said, yeah. White keys, black keys. That's pretty cool. And they said, well, can you clap these rhythms? I clapped the rhythms. And they said, all right, you're playing drums. Here's some drumsticks. And that was that. And then, fast forward, I was put in. I was always a bell player because I could read, and the other kids were like drummers. And then I was in like the highest band in like 7th grade and 8th grade, and the band director in middle school was pretty. He was pretty militant. I mean, he was. He was a perfectionist. I say militant, but that's probably not accurate. Militant comes more into play in my drum corps years, but he was definitely a perfectionist, and he used to throw stuff. It's funny when I saw Whiplash, I was like, oh yeah, isn't that what everyone does? That's not everyone's experience. He never really threw it at us though. He would like literally throw it really high up just to kind of startle us. But I appreciated that level of perfectionism, and as a result, I think not in execution, but in principle, I still carry some of that with me today. I'm not throwing things, at all, but anymore, I guess. And then, I get into high school. Marching band was really cool, and that's when I kind of fell in love. And I was in jazz band my freshman year, and there was already the cool senior drum set player, so that wasn't an option. So they said, well, you can play, play the percussion parts. I said, all right, cool. So I either played like a couple like auxiliary keyboard parts, or I played percussion parts, and mostly that would end up being used like bongos or vibraphone. So I kind of got into it then. In '95, I saw, in '94, I saw Drum Corps for the first time, which was Blue Devils '94, which I was just like, what is this? Like, this is so amazing. Like, what has happened? Like, I knew marching band, but this was like all the things I loved about marching band, and it was on TV, and it was so cool, and it's like the sports, and I loved football, and I loved it was my whole mind was blown. I mean, '94, my teacher Ray Donato, showed that to me, but 95 is when I saw the broadcast. And so 95 broadcast, I mean, every single snare drum lick that I could visually see on that broadcast, I tried to fake play or tried to learn and play, and I would pause the VHS and, I recorded it and pause the VHS and go back, and I fell in love with it. So I found out there was a drum corps. I saw Magic of Orlando, and I said, that's pretty close. I was like 2 hours from my house, 2.5, 3 hours from my house, and I auditioned on quads. I did not get the quad book, technique book. John Campese, if you're listening, I still stand by that story. And I went up and auditioned, and they were like, let's play the accent tap. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. They gave it to me. I couldn't hang. They put me in the pit room. It was like me and 2 other people at the time. And I played front ensemble. And I wasn't good enough with my front ensemble chops to play much. So I literally played glockenspiel on the 50-yard line for the entire season. I just played the bells. I had no cymbals, no toms. I played bells on the 50-yard line. And I learned it. But I learned every lick on the bells, even if it wasn't my part. I learned it. I loved it. And then one day I want to say we were either an Eat Pack Load. I want to say it was Eat Pack Load, or we were post-show. And I hear this vibraphone off in the distance playing stuff I'd never heard before. And so I found him, and it was our teacher, Jerry Carpenter. And I found him, and I said, man, what are you playing? And he's like, oh, this is Footprints, by Wayne Shorter. And I said, oh, cool. What are the notes? Like, where's the music? Like, what are you looking at? He's like, oh, I'm not looking at notes, man. I'm just playing the changes. I'm like, changes? I've been in jazz band, but big band, jazz band, if you're not soloing, you don't really, I just had the parts, played the parts, high school jazz band, whatever. And he's like, yeah, man. I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, this is a C minor. I'm playing the melody, and then I'm kind of choosing what I want to play over this. And that was it. I was like, okay. And so I got back. I looked up and see if I could, I shook the trees out, see if I could find a jazz vibraphone teacher in my area. I found Errol Rakipov, and Errol he was a student of Gary Burton and a Berklee graduate. If you ever hear Shega Desudao, she's the person who transcribed that first. It was the famous Gary Burton solo, and that was and he let me hear. He loaned me records, because you had to do that back then. He loaned me some records, and he loaned me Gary Burton and Chick Corea live in Zurich, 1979. And when I heard this for the first time, it was my first time hearing Gary Burton. I was 16 years old. I remember where I was sitting. I remember what I was doing. And it was like angels descended from on high. I was like, what this? It was the feeling I got in my chest when I heard the first rhythmic motif of Senor Mouse. I was just like, I was hooked. That was it. I knew that I was going to play that stupid instrument for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I mean that, and then I went to I got out of school. I went to Florida Atlantic University, which was our state school. They didn't have any jazz program. I mean, they had a decent, all right, jazz program, but they didn't have a mallet program or a jazz vibraphone track. And the percussion track at the time, it's much better now, but it was pretty much all drum set. So because I wanted to play vibes, they put me with the drum set teacher, and they put me with the jazz piano teacher. And they put me with the classical percussion guy, which is at the conservatory next door, Harrod Conservatory. And try to put all that together to make jazz vibraphone curriculum, I suppose. And it wasn't very fun. The David Hammer, and I always shout out my teachers, by the way, just because it's my little way of making sure they keep their memory fresh and their legacy moving. But Dave Hammer was a great piano teacher. Tony Lavender is no longer with us, but he was a wonderful drum set teacher. But I had this classical percussion teacher, and he first minute I walked in, he goes, I hear you like marching band and you like jazz. Well, I hate both. And I'm like, all right. He's like, I'm no jazzer. I'm not trying to play changes. We call it cadenzas here, not improvisation. I mean, he just basically smashed everything I loved. And he said, can you play some scales? So I played my scales in the way that a 90s drum corps mallet player would play scales, which is like at my eyeballs, And he was like, whoa, no, that's crazy. What are you doing? That's, you don't play it that way here. And he had me playing in a way that I haven't seen before or since. I mean, at least not defined. He called it, I don't remember I want to say he called it tank grip, but it was completely parallel mallets. So everything I would play would be completely sideways. Like everything was this way. Like I'd play
Oh.
scales and super low and anytime I would start kind of going back to, and I would have to like, it was weird. And I might be, I'm not saying his name because I, don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, but I might be, maybe my recollection is wrong, but I just recall it being a very, very oppressive, and every chance he could, he would knock jazz players' lack of technique or knock drum corps players and how they ruin their chops and all this stuff. And I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong. I'm just saying at 18 years old, somebody who was in love with drum corps and jazz, that was not the way to motivate me.
Right.
That's all.
Okay.
And then I got into Berklee School of Music. So I went there, and at the time, I had been playing out and playing gigs since I was like 15, 16 years old, and that's another story. But I mean, I had already been playing a lot, so I'd saved up a lot of money. I was staying home, so I actually went and attempted to pay for it myself. I didn't even apply. I applied for a scholarship. I didn't get it, and then I didn't want to do financial aid. I thought it was silly. I knew already I was making $100 a gig, $150 a gig, give or take. Some gigs not even, some gigs a little more. But I knew it was going to be silly to pay $30,000 at the time. It's like twice that now. $30,000 a year to get a degree. They make $100 every time I executed that degree in a show. So I was like, well, I'll try to pay for it. And I had a friend up there who lived there. I lived with them, and money ran out pretty quick. And it was like, all right, well, that's it. And they're like, well, you can apply for loans. You're already here. We can get you this loan, that loan. I said, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And so I said, this has been fun. And I went back to FAU, but it was obviously the culture in Berklee, the environment was, New England Conservatory, all this stuff was such a collaborative and mind-opening environment that I just couldn't go back to Florida Atlantic. So I kind of hung it up for a little while and went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale. Did a couple years in graphic design and advertising. And then I was miserable with that. And I looked at my vibraphone, and it was like my clothing hamper, my fold-in clothes hamper. All my clothes was on top of my vibraphone. I hadn't
And how
played
old were you at that time?
22.
Okay.
22. Side note: my father had just passed in a car accident, and so I was already I was dealing with that weight as well at the same time. So it was kind of like, I just want to get out of here. So I bought a marimba, and with the last of my money, I went to Nebojša Živković's summer thing, and I'm 24 at this point. I went to Nebojša's summer conservatory thing, like a 2-week camp, 2.5-week situation in Germany. And then I stayed in Germany. I went to the marimba competition in Belgium. I competed in that. Eric Odaimo won. I mean, I was going to win, but instead I came in. I didn't make it out of the first round. And it was funny because I was with Erico at UNT camp a couple years ago, and we were talking about that. And she's like, "Oh, I remember that one. That was the one I won." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. You did win that one." And so we and then I was in a classical cave for a while, and I traveled. That probably did the most that time in my life being abroad. And then I went to Japan for a little bit. I went to I was in France. I was in Spain for a little bit, and then I pretty much just spent all my money. I'd set up. I'd be hanging out with Nebojša. He would the most lessons I learned was setting up percussion instruments for Nebojša. I mean, it was, and I know he's somewhat of a controversial figure, but I love him for that. He was never anything but gracious, nice, and honest. And you got to respect someone where you know where they stand because they're honest, especially nowadays. Whether you like it or you don't like it, at least you know it's sincere. And then that was it. I came back. I didn't like the culture of classical music. Like I didn't really like my experience, I should say, within the classical structure of percussion. I didn't like the expectation of perfectionism that I had come to sort of push aside for the risk taking of jazz music. I would take music at different tempos if I felt like it. I would play easier solos, but play them harder, and I would want to add stuff and do stuff, and I would always get kind of shot down. So it wasn't really, it's always about like, what does the composer want? What does the composer want? What does the composer want? And I respect that, but it just wasn't where I was at that moment. So I went back to jazz and kind of never looked back, and all that time I was always teaching percussion at, percussion director, percussion tech, pit tech. Um, I kind of that was kind of when I stepped away from drum corps from like '05 to '17 when I came back and did a couple weeks on tour with Blue Stars, and then at 18 with Blue Coats, and now and then in 2019 I moved to Georgia, where
Yeah.
I currently reside, and so it was my first move out of Florida, and that's pretty much it. Now the focus is practicing when I can, but dadding all the time.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Okay. Plenty to sift back through.
right,
I want to talk about your time as a high school teacher for sure.
sure.
One thing you had said on your blog on your website, you had a post that's for God's sake, don't major in music
Oh
education,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
then funny because like 14 years or something you were teaching uh, like marching band and high school percussion. What
Ye-
what what's behind that title?
Yeah, clickbait. I
Hmm.
mean, you know, um, it was just kind of one of those things. Like I cringe every time I sort of see it, but I know that that's why I got so many views and so much conversation around it. And I could always tell who read the article to the end and who didn't,
Hmm.
based on their argument with it. Because at the end, it just says, I guess, and the premise of it is the fact that I would see all of these people, and I felt this pressure, all of these young people who were talented, who loved to play, who you could tell really just wanted to play, but they were either, there was pressure from external pressure that was telling them that playing music wasn't a sustainable life choice, and they couldn't do it on their own terms. So they would say, well, I'm going to be a band director. And as I've gone through my life and career, and what kind of spurred this on was I would see band directors who were really bad at it, who were doing a disservice to their students. They didn't like it. They weren't happy in their life, in their job. They were resentful. They would say things to me like, "Man, I wish I would have just played," or "I wish this," or "I wish that," or just have full of regrets, like veiled regrets.
Mm.
And I felt bad for their students because their programs were mediocre or worse, and or they were just, the kids weren't fed. They weren't feeling, they weren't getting all the benefits of having someone who's helping them to hold the vision of what music can do for their life, regardless of what career they choose. They just didn't see that joy. So music, you could just see from these kids and the way they sort of plotted around that music was this thing that they did, and not, they didn't understand the value in it, and how it related to them. And so I realized, and I always, I guess, had realized it, but it just had come to a head where it was just these fear-based decisions that were, well, I want to stay in music and the arts, but I don't know any other way. And the only thing I've ever seen, the only thing I know about is either you play, get in an orchestra, you play gigs and struggle your whole life in bars, or you're a band director and you make, a halfway decent living, you get good benefits and a pension, and you retire. And I guess that's what I'll do. And so,
Hmm.
but when and you don't realize it if you've been around these kind of band directors a lot, but when you see someone who lives this stuff, who loves this stuff, who can't wait to, who just, oh, we got to organize the MLK Day parade, and what are we going to do for this week, and they got the schedule, the band schedule out, the whole fall schedule out before the school year is even out, and they're back and forth, and they're communicating with people, and they got kids in their place all the time. They're doing the officer meetings, and they're always having leadership meetings, and there's always something happening, and they're doing all the extra stuff, and they can't wait to be around their band director culture at like Midwest and all of these other things. And you can see the difference in the kids, and you can see the passion for the education, and what gets them isn't playing the concert, it's watching little Timmy succeed at playing the concert. And that they might as well be on Carnegie Hall. Like when you see that, you're like, oh, so there are people who want to do this. And
Mm.
for me, I've never, the idea of being a band director for me is like, I never wanted to do it. And this goes back further than that, because I came up and I was always ADD, and it was undiagnosed. So there was a lot of things that I could have been more successful at had I understood, or had I recognized that mental illness, had I understood that, the anxiety, I would get anxiety. I can stay focused for a long time. I just have a hard time transitioning in and out of things. So
Mm.
the anxiety for me in starting new tasks was real. So what bigger anxiety than registering for college, and figuring out, going from this sort of structured, I never had to do anything, I just had to show up for 12 years, to now, like, no, you got to go to the admin office, and then you got to walk over to this, you got to figure this out. And I'd put it off, and I would put it off, and I would say things like, oh, I'm going to take a year off, or I'm going to just take the semester off, help out my family with some money. And I hear these things repeated year after year after year, and I'm like, dude, you're not going to college.
Yeah.
Or this, not this way at least. And because no one knew how to kind of communicate that with me, it was very challenging for me coming up. So the idea of being within this sort of rigid structure, and side note, my father never went past third grade. He moved here from Jamaica, immigrated here from Jamaica to follow my mother, actually to Canada, then to New York, and then started a landscape business where he saw a lot of green grass and said, let's cut it. And then he saw, then it just kind of grew from there. My brother kind of grew up, helped him out with it, and they both started working together. My brother now runs it. They build huge pools and outdoor hardscapes and all this kind of stuff. Both of my brothers are entrepreneurs, the two that I'm closest with, and even my sister. So I've never seen, and none of them graduated from college. My older brother will tell you he graduated from UM, but I don't recall going to any graduation ceremony. I know he went to UM. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'll take his word for it. But and I know my other brother, he's in finance, so he had to pass a ton of like certifications, Series 7, Series 6, Series whatever. But none of them did the traditional route, is my point. Either way, it wasn't traditional. And so it never to me registered that, like, oh, college is the only way to be successful. If you don't go to college, then that's, there's no hope for you. You're gonna end up working at Chili's and for the rest of your life, and nothing anything wrong with that. But so that never really registered to me. So the idea that, like, this is the thing I had to do. So sort of, I've always had a sort of an entrepreneurial mindset. I've watched my family. I've watched them all sort of build things. I loved building things. I love the challenges of that. So the idea of being in a 9 to 3, having to go to this district meeting and that district meeting and do these other things and teach these other aspects that have nothing to do with what I want to teach, and then teach instruments that I wasn't passionate about, learning about how to teach just wasn't for me. So I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah.
And I just never. And everyone would tell me, "Why don't you go do this as a fallback? And why don't you, get this education degree as a fallback?" And to me, it was. I figured if I had it, I'd fall back. When things got tough, and so I didn't. And I guess that whole article was written from a point like, if you really want to be a band director, of course, go into music education. Do whatever you have to do to get to that thing, but don't do it because you're scared of the uncertainty of doing what you love. Because to me, I feel like the only way to be certain about being successful is to be on fire with passion about what you love to do, because you'll do it. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, and the idea that a music education degree, one, is safer or easier is crazy, because those degrees are so hard. The course load for them is loads and loads harder than a performance degree. And I was staying with a friend who didn't get a degree in music education, but is teaching full time right now, and she works like in extreme hours, like way more than I am doing. And it is, like, as a fallback, it's pretty counterintuitive because it is such a demanding job to go into. So that really makes sense.
Yeah.
But you were still involved in these programs as a
I love
teacher,
teaching
right?
percussion.
Teaching percussion. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious. You have a lot of great thoughts on just how to teach that instrument, specifically because it's often the instrument class that gets the least amount of attention for lots of reasons, which maybe you can go into why that is, that percussionists just aren't getting the musical training that they need at that time or deserve.
Well, I mean, the why is, it's a numbers game in one aspect. I mean, you have this one group of this one instrument, this one section that maybe is what, 8, 10 people, 15, let's be generous, in an average band program at a pretty large scale, I'd say, is probably 15, maybe 10 kids in a band program. And then you have 60, 70 kids who breathe air into their instrument and play a wind instrument.
Yeah.
and then you have one band director. At least in Florida, most schools have one band director. They don't have two and three like most of the I guess I wrote another article about our young percussionists aren't being trained to be musicians. And that article had a much more clickbaity title, but Ivan Trevino walked me back off the ledge with that one. He's my niceness editor.
So that was your fallback clickbait title.
That was my fallback title. That was like the medium ground. I think it was first like, we're failing our. It was pretty aggressive. I was pretty was pretty aggressive at first, but so I think a lot of it is a matter of resources. So there's no. I'm not stating that I don't think there's a blame. I think the challenge is more of a systemic issue in terms of how to structure it. In some cases, you walk into a band program. Here's your budget. Here's what you can do, and you don't know what you don't know. So you're like, all right, well, I'm a band director. Let's do this. Let's get into it, and you just kind of deal with the resources that you're given. But the challenge then becomes what the standard of teaching percussionists is. So you have these players who get an immediate in tune, assuming instruments are in tune, obviously, in tune note by striking it with anything for the most part. All right, guys, we're all going to play a concert, concert F, and there's my F. So you're all right, cool. Percussionists, go sit down. We work with the musicians in the group, and you sort of get this sort of disdain for them, and then because they have all this idle time, and what's 11-year-old kid's going to do with idle time? They're going to get in some trouble. So they become sort of these troublemakers. They kind of sort of develop this sort of identity of sort of being these kids who just can't sit still. They got the ADD. They can't do this, but there's just too much idle time, and their mouths aren't involved in making the music. So they use them in other ways, and they talk and they get in trouble. So you get kind of this negative experience in sixth grade, and maybe you're fortunate. We had a percussion guy who came in 2 days a month or something like that when I was in sixth grade, and he would work with us, but it was still relatively boring because we would just sort of, but it was always this repetition of technique. But meanwhile, the band kids, the kids who are wind kids, I should say, are working on all of this organic stuff that relates to everything. Breathing. Like, all right, guys, let's breathe. Like, you breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4. Breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4. All right, guys, let's everyone open your ears. Do you hear that? Here's a B flat. I'm not perfect pitch. I don't know if I just sang a B flat, but here's a B flat, and then they play the B flat. Okay, no, hear it again. Okay, cool. Now, hey, are we breathing? Are we breathing? Guys, posture. Come on, sit up straight. All right, open your ears now. Now, do you hear the players on either side of you? Yeah, listen to those players. Balance with those players. Blend with those players. Breathe, posture, air, all of these things that, as percussionists, you walk into college, any decent college, you're going to be like, hey, are you blending? Are you balancing? Are you playing well? Are you breathing? What's up with your posture? Why are you standing like that? Hey, are you listening to the sound of that snare drum tuning? Do you hear that the timpani's out of tune? Are you hearing the way your bass drum mallet sounds on there? Should it be less articulate, more and these kids are like, okay, no, I've never thought about this stuff before.
Can I interest you in a sassy remark from the back row?
Sure.
That's what the percussionist is used to.
Exactly. So I mean, it's a disservice. And so one thing that and when that article that I wrote had gotten kind of heated, you could always tell who came from great programs in Indiana, California, Texas. Mm-hmm. They get really defensive because like, well, we don't do that. Well, okay, but there's a lot of schools in America who aren't at BOA Grand Nats. And who aren't Coppell in Texas and who aren't, Carmel and whoever else you want to put in that situation, or Tarpon Springs, who don't have that. They don't have the resources, and they don't have a visionary director who is willing to come in and take the reins and do all the things. And some of them just like, hey, I'm at this small school. This is where my family is, where I grew up. I'm teaching this small school. There's not a lot of money. I remember teaching at one school right after 9/11. And we had to take a Greyhound bus there, and it was Mount Airy, North Carolina, and the kids were allowed to miss. The kid would be like, yeah, I'm not going to be at the rehearsal. I was like, why not? He's like, I'll be priming backer. I'll be priming tobacco. And that is such a huge industry in that area that the kid has to go prime tobacco with his family on the farm. That's what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. They're not making rehearsal. Like, they still appreciate summers off because that is harvest time.
Yeah.
So they're not going to a 3 week band camp. They're not doing these types of things. They don't. That's not the kids don't go and work in those things. They build. They're generational farmers. They're generational tobacco farmers. They do, whatever the case may be. And so that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that wow, there's a lot of schools that don't have even what I had, which wasn't that much compared to what I'm teaching with now, etc. So a lot of times when people get defensive, it's because they're kind of seeing it through their worldview, feeling defensive because they're not doing the negative things that I'm mentioning, and they're doing positive things. And I'm not speaking necessarily to those, but we do even within that track though.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue is that a lot of students come out, and again, I never saw a marimba until I was in high school. We had xylophone bells, and that was it. I never saw a vibraphone until I was in high school. And so when I would come out, and the first time I got to see it was in high school, and the first application of that was in marching band, was outdoors. So if you have a kid who now is never worried about balance and blend, hasn't really learned to truly appreciate the intrinsic values of music and their role within it, at least begin to appreciate that, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Then and their first time in front of a real marimba is outside, and now you have a tech who's not an educator and who leaves after marching season's over, who's like, here's how we're going to win our trophy, and now you're starting with your mallets up here and you're hammering out the instrument, and that's how you think you got to play, and you're playing these huge aggressive piston strokes, and then and the reward is by playing the harder stuff, the technically fulfilling things, and the technically challenging things. Then when you transition out of that into percussion ensemble, into your orchestra, your band, your wind band, whatever, now you're like, well, this is boring. This sucks. This is terrible. Like, this isn't, now I got to do this stuff again. This is awful, and kids either quit or they just can't wait to marching band and they phone it in because they don't realize how wonderful and important that symbol choice they made during that role, like what symbol they use, how that here they're not listening to the whole musical phrase because they only warm up their hands. Everything is right left right right left right left left, pattern based, technically based, arm based, and then you have an instructor in marching band who's telling you everything to do. No, it's this, it's that. Start using inches on a keyboard instead of dynamics. And you're micromanaging everything. We need 6 more rehearsals. You're playing the same 7 minutes of music for 4 months. And then you get out and you're like, I don't want to play this triangle part. This is stupid. Kids sitting down in the back and they're, why would I play? Like, why would they want to play that? They have not built an appreciation for listening one time. Even in the ensemble, they're just like, no, you're playing dirty. Like, let's do the check pattern. Do the check pattern. No, like, hey, listen to the guy next to you. What do you hear him doing? What are his tendencies? What's happening? What is happening in the? Should we crescendo there, Mr. Tucker? I don't know. What's happening in the music? I don't know. I know you don't know. So, but if you realize that this is the resolution, we went from the tonic, we went 5-1. Now here we are. On the cadence just finished. We just resolved. This is the moment. What do you think we should do? Oh yeah, we should crescendo. Oh, interesting, cool. But hear it. Now let's listen to it. Let's listen to just the band this run. What do you hear? What do you feel? How can we make people? What are we supposed to feel? What's the audience supposed to feel? How can we contribute to that? Like those are questions that should be asked, and they're never getting asked. No, I don't want to say never. That's wrong. They're not getting asked enough in the marching band idiom.
Yeah, I really like this for a lot of reasons. If it sounds like we're being hypercritical of band directors, I think we both have so much appreciation for that craft, and also it's just like underfunded, overworked, and also like percussion, if anyone's listened to the Josh Jones episode of this podcast, like percussion technique goes so deep, way more than like a music ed major is going to get in one semester learning about percussion, especially with how many instruments there are. And then on top of that, like this director is having to do marching band and conform to this hyper visual acrobatic style of playing, right? And it's like, okay, maybe your school doesn't have funding to get someone in to come teach percussion. And it's like, okay, well, what do we do to solve this? And one element of happiness that I've started to appreciate more and more of is just awareness. And it sounds like the suggestions that you're making are, how can we encourage students, especially percussion students who aren't actively involved all the time in the back, like to become aware of what's going on in the music and on top of that, of like how exciting that awareness is and how that can inform things. And so many of the suggestions that you were just giving were like, how can we get the students to start making decisions, just asking questions.
And that's it. And that's, and I mean, the secret, not the secret, but I feel like there's two main ingredients to being quote unquote to joy. I separate joy from happiness because I think that joy is something intrinsic and happiness is something that can be quickly whisked away with a bad situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I mean, that's just me. That's just how I internalize those terms. Obviously, everyone has their own application of that. But I think it's anticipation, something to look forward to, and awareness. I think those two things, underneath those two umbrellas, lie sort of all of that joy that you can keep. That's what was one of the huge problems with the pandemic was everything that we were looking forward to just got wiped away and got replaced with uncertainty. So there was all of this anxiety because we didn't know what was next. And when you don't know what's next, it just creates this whirlwind of negativity that starts to sort of it's breeding ground for negativity. But going back to and applying that to this, it's not about a band director having resources or no resources. That would be a simple fix, but I think the challenge is that we don't require the same level of musicianship from our percussionists from the ground. If you're in sixth grade, all my beginning band is here, and now obviously I understand that this is an overgeneralization or oversimplification of a larger. There's other nuances to this, but if I'm saying, all right, everyone's going to play a B flat, percussionists are going to play a roll. Say you have no money, but you still have choices. Even if it's like, hey, interesting B flat roll there. Like, did you listen to that? What did you hear? Well, I sounded kind of like I was going dig it. I sounded like I was accenting maybe one of the hands was really heavy. Okay, can we fix that? How do you think you can fix that? I'm not sure. We'll try. Just listen and we want to make your roll to sort of match the sound of that tuba player over there on the timpani or whatever it is. So just listen to that tuba player and play the roll. Now, what are you playing with? He's like, well, I got these twigs off the tree outside. Okay, interesting. You have any other choices? Well, there's some lollipops over there. Okay, do me a favor. Try the lollipops. Oh, yeah, lollipop. Which one sounds better? I like the way the lollipops sound. Cool. They feel better? Well, the twigs feel better. I was like, all right, well, why don't we go back and forth between that while we're working through this tuning stuff? Okay, cool. Now, that is nothing to do with resources. You could be like, well, I think my hands sound better. Cool. You know what? I think your fingers sound better too. You got nice fat thumbs. Go ahead and do it like this. Awesome. You know what I mean?
And
That's
also
what we got.
like that it didn't require any knowledge. Like you only asked
exactly.
questions. You were discovering together.
The goal is to make them curious, is to make them listen, is to inspire that curiosity that makes them, when they have resources, now to be like, oh, but why would I choose this mallet? This mallet feels and sounds so much better for me. Oh, well, what piece are we playing? We're playing, Mahler's Fifth in seventh grade. Awesome. I'm kidding, but yeah, let's. I want to use this cymbal. This is a low brass. It's very deep crescendo. I want to use this big dry ride cymbal. That's not a suspended cymbal. We have a 16-inch classic suspended over there. It's like, yeah, but this ride, this is the cymbal that you need to make this moment happen. Like we'll save that one. I can walk into 9 out of 10 art schools. Again, I don't have empirical data of that. I'm just throwing that number around. I can walk into a majority of even art schools and be like, hey. And he listened to something and asked the suspended cymbal player, why did you choose that cymbal? And in high school, the chances I'd be like, it was here. It was right here. It was, I don't know, it was here, and it's a suspended cymbal we use. Yeah, but it's a high woodwind. We're at 180. It's a 2-count cymbal roll. I mean, you're on an 18-inch, thick K Constantinople cymbal or whatever, and maybe that 15-inch crash on the drum set. Go grab that. Oh, there it is. Do you like that? Well, yeah, I kind of like it better. Cool. Then why don't you be a musician and an artist and make that choice? And then let the band director say, hey, man, I don't like that cymbal. But you're now making an artistic choice, so you're an artist. So helping these kids become artists. And musicians, not musicians, rather wind players sort of get this on a regular basis to a certain extent, that they're encouraged to use their ears. We're not, And so even in marching band now, even in marching band, I am very, very adamant about every warm up, not only warming up your hands, but warming up your ears. I feel like you should warm up 3 things. I feel like you should warm up 3 things when you do a warm up. And this is for personal practice too. You should warm up your hands, right? Get the muscles moving correctly. You should warm up your ears. So I usually start warm ups. I don't know why people start warm ups at like full volume. It's like sprinting right out the, when you walk out your door. I feel like starting at soft volume where you can be successful, and which leads to the third one, which is kind of like you warm up your spirit, you warm up your ego. You feel good, like you're making great sounds. You're getting your ears tuned to that day, to the room, to the sounds, playing nice. You start playing up here, you start missing notes real fast. You start missing notes like in the third note. You're already kind of a little inaccurate because you're playing really high. You're just worried about warming up your muscles and stretching them out or whatever, and you're missing notes. Your ears are already automatically like, I'm cool with those bad sounds. Like, that's fine. And so when you start making them, when you're actually trying to apply it, you're less likely to be as self-critical about some of those sounds that you're creating. And so, I like to warm up my ego. I call it just, I want to feel good. I want to know that I can do this. So when I'm playing stuff, or even if I'm playing some nice little chords and I'm improvising stuff, I'm focusing on my breathing. My goal before I start playing rep or what I'm playing is to feel good about myself and to transmit those good feelings outward into what I'm trying to play. And so I feel like we only warm up hands, and I want my students to feel that way too. So we warm up stuff, we feel good, play at a soft volume, at a slow tempo, open their ears, ask them what they hear. I'll walk over to a player and ask them to maybe crescendo without everybody else, and ask everyone to follow that person, and maybe I'll just give instructions to that person. We'll just focus on our breathing and getting oxygen to our muscles, which also helps us play faster. And then, I'll be nothing but complimentary. And if I'm not complimentary, I'm asking questions. Hey,
okay, I like that.
Yeah, and so it's like, oh, that was interesting. You guys hear that? It was a little challenging. There was some challenges there. I try to never use words like that was a problem or that was bad, unless it was bad, because I'm very honest. I mean, but when we get to a point when we're in rep and we're doing stuff and they're just like, you have to tell them, it's like, hey man, it's not good. You're not playing well. What's going on? But there's still the question. But yeah, especially in warm up though, it's like, yeah, there were some challenges there. What did you guys hear? What did you guys hear? I usually just say, what did you guys hear? Is my number one thing. If there was something off, and sometimes it's a cop out because I just don't know what was wrong. So I'm hoping they do.
Yeah.
But what did you guys hear? And it'll be like, if they're not sure, I'm like, well, let's play it again. What did you guys hear? And just creating that, like we were saying, creating that awareness in them of what's happening around them. And unless I'm just working with new kids or a new group, all the exercises and warm-ups are music-based and harmony-based. So there's a harmonic progression to everything. I rarely, unless it's a very beginner group, but even if it is, I try not to. I rarely just do like chromatic or just scale-based stuff. To me, that's stuff they should do at home to work on the function and the fundamental discipline to be able to come back and then we play through it. We'll play through a scale, and it's gotta work the ears. If it's not, how many times did you ever do indoor or drum corps or anything like that?
Yeah, I did.
So so I mean, if you did that, I would go to these warm ups, and 3-hour block in the morning in the front ensemble was spent like chopping out. You warm up, you get it out, then you're chopping out. You're building speed. You're pushing kids. Their hands are bleeding. Chopping out. Let's work the run, work the check. And it's like, all right, guys, we're done chopping out. Everyone play the ballad. It's like, okay, why aren't you listening? And you're in ensemble. Oh, can't you guys listen back? Why aren't you listening back? Why aren't you listening across the ensemble? It's like, because you just spent 3 hours, with a Met blaring in their face. They're in survival mode right now, trying to play dirt at like 210, and your dirt is an exercise. It's not like they're trying to play dirty. They're trying to play these fast scale exercises at 210, and now you're requiring all of these different responsibilities that you don't work on in the 3-hour block before. Chop out, fine. Build your strength, build your chops, great. But why not build it something musical with direction to the lines and require them to listen? Keep asking those questions throughout the day, so it's something they're just automatically into. So I feel like that's yeah.
I'm super into it, and I always have to laugh when episodes get into marching band territory because it at one point was such a huge part of my identity that I haven't revisited in so long. And then when I get into these conversations, I'm just overwhelmed by this like flood of memory and experiences. But
and don't get me wrong, I love it. I love marching band. I love it's our team sport. It's the thing that builds those qualities that you'd get if you're on a football team and working together and camaraderie and all of these things that these students who aren't the most sports inclined, and not obviously as a whole, but a lot of students wouldn't get those kind of skills elsewhere. And I think I love it. I love watching it. It's a nonsensical sport that makes no kind of sense, and I absolutely adore it.
Yeah. I Real quick, can you confirm for me like your two parts of happiness, anticipation, and what was the other one?
Awareness.
Yeah.
Awareness. Yeah.
I felt affirmed hearing that because I've been kind of thinking about my equation for it, and it's like hope and curiosity, and I feel like those are synonyms and kind of the same process of like
Yeah.
your this this idea that something better can come, and then also just in the moment being open to what direction that might be in. And to just come back to awareness, I can't overstate how rewarding I feel like it is to teach that basic skill as early as possible, because sometimes when you're playing, especially I felt like in marching band, when it's very much about these rudiments and these patterns, and you can kind of just go into muscle memory because you're just playing like at this number of inches, um, and just like you can turn that part off of you. But actually hearing what it sounds like in the moment and being connected to it, and then not having a value judgment of like that was good or bad, but what did that sound like, is so freeing and exciting. And the more I just ask, like, what does my instrument sound like while I'm playing? That's why I feel like I'm actually in the moment and actually listening and experiencing the music, is just being curious and aware about it. And that's so cool. I think your mantra of, if like I don't not critiquing, just asking questions, like, is perfect.
Yeah, and I'm not perfect at it. It's something I'm constantly working at as an educator, and it's taxing because your ego will get in the way, and you want to fix it because you can. And so, especially when it comes to something like marching band, the problem is it happens first in the season. If it happened in the spring only, then I think I would be more inclined to probably micromanage some parts and fix and vertically align things more aggressively. But because it happens so early in the season, and it sets the pace for the rest of the year, and it sets the philosophy and the mindset for the rest of the year, it's important that that philosophy transfers indoors, outdoors, concert, not concert, whatever it is that you're doing. And one thing that I found, and if I go back to, and it's interesting, I'm up here in Georgia now, but the school I'm at, I got here in 2019, so it got cut short by pandemic, and then the next year we just finished was just survival mode,
Yeah.
and trying to keep kids engaged. So I haven't really been able to. This is my first year where I'm really excited to like level set. I almost feel like it's year one.
Sweet.
So it's pretty cool. But if you go back, I was at the last school I was at, Boca High, for 14 years, 15 years, 14, 15 years, something like that, before I left. And so that program was really a model of, for better or for worse, was, reflected my philosophies and my approach. And so what would always happen invariably every season, marching season, was we would, especially later on, as I started to really adopt this and be way more of a question asker as opposed to let's over rehearse and clean and all these kind of things like this. And I would somewhere in South Florida, because of the weather, the season goes a little bit further. It goes till the end, almost till Thanksgiving, week before Thanksgiving. So sometime in October, when competition season was about to start, we would just be dirty. Like the front ensemble would just not be sounding good. And I write pretty hard stuff. I always believe I write it and they'll achieve it for the most part. I'll maybe water some later, but I write to the standard. It's always pushing. It's never like at their level. It's always pushing. And that there's that too. And so I'm listening to it, and I always have this point in the season where I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Like, these kids aren't getting any better. They don't sound very good. But then, almost right after that point, there's this moment where it'll be not very good, and I'll go to them and I'll be like, hey guys, you have to, and then I'll see someone be like, I got it, I know what it was me, like and then it'll be fixed the next rep, and then I'll say, hey, did you hear it? And someone will be like, yeah, we got it, we heard it, Someone, they would just start calling them their own mistakes out. Like, yeah, I was rushing that one. Oh man, I wasn't ready for the rep or whatever. And then I could counsel to give them tools to help with that. So when someone says, hey, yeah, I wasn't ready for the rep, I'm like, all right, you good for the next rep? Or do you understand what you did, that you can be more prepared for this one for success? Oh yeah, I got it. Hey, I rushed. Do you know where you rushed? I'm not quite sure. Can we rep it again? Yes, let's rep it again. And so once that starts to happen, then I'm off for the rest of the season. I get to be a fan. All I'm
Mm.
doing at that point. And then they never sound terrible again. Unless some stuff might be above their skill set, but I mean, it's for the most part they just never. They're self cleaning. They make mistakes. They fix them. I hardly even have to say anything. I might just raise my hand and they'll be like, or if it's something that happened multiple times, then of course I'll be like, they might not realize something's happening just because marching band is nuts, so they don't know they're out of time from the guys, they're listening over there, but they know the tools. Hey, what's happening with this? Hey, so where are you listening? Well, I'm listening back. I'm going to try watching the drum major this time. Okay, cool. But just make sure you lay back.
Mm.
So stuff like that would happen, and then when that happens, it's just it's joy for the rest of the season. And usually I get a good three to 4 weeks where it locks in, and it's really good. But either way, even if it doesn't, I much rather take kids striving for challenging parts that they really are enjoying and working hard until the end of the season and having a good time and learning how to be whole. This making them better artists, musicians, humans than I would if I. And then here's the key: it's their ensemble. It's not my ensemble. I can make it my ensemble by saying, all right, we're going to rehearse 3 extra times this week and that week, and I'm going to be there and I'm going to click it and I'm going to teach you how to do this and bring you a check pad and we'll do this and just 2 notes. Now add 1 note and add another note, 4 notes, and we're playing an extra rehearsal. Meet early before the competition, beating them up, and then it's my ensemble. But there's such a distinct difference with the students, the way they treat their instruments and the way they treat their music and the way when they feel the sense of ownership over what they've accomplished and don't attribute it to me, but attribute it to each other.
Do you
And
make that explicit to them? That like,
oh yeah,
listen, y'all, this is your ensemble. You make that
early
clear.
on, early on, I'll say, I'm not going to call any extra rehearsals. This is not. These are the rehearsals we've laid out, and as we get, I'll remind them that we could call extra rehearsals, and I could beat this stuff into you, but then it would be my ensemble, and it's not my ensemble. I don't have to be out here. It's your ensemble. So I do, but I don't talk about it much. It's the hope is that it's apparent, and then you see it kind of transmitted, and then once you get the kids to that level, then the new kids come in and see the standard. And it's funny now because there's certain traditions at the school that I'm at that were carried over that are very like, the bando traditions. Like we do this every Thursday night, and seniors always do this, and they do all this kind of stuff, all this kind of sort of fun stuff. And I kind of got rid of a lot of it, so that they could, because the music wasn't very good. They were messing around. They weren't ready for reps. They in concert band. They would. Anyway, there was the priorities were out of place. The fun was coming from the hang more than from the music, and so, they would be like, why can't we do this or this? I'm like, guys, do you think I don't care about this stuff? Like I want you to do all the things that are safe and legal and moral that are fun for you, but they can't be the thing. You know what I mean? We got to do the job first, and then we do this other stuff. I said I would love nothing more than to trust you to not wreck this room by being in there, but until I know that you can be trusted. But as just like any kid, what I mean, just like any student or child that you have, like as they build that trust, they get more freedom, and that's really where we're at, what we're trying to do. Show me, don't tell me, but let's take care of business first. So I can't remember the last time at Boca High, other than just regular maintenance and cleaning, that I ever had to go in and be like, what's happened? There's terrible behavior and there are these things and you guys are prioritizing this stuff. I've never even thought about the other things they do as a culture in the school. I never, even because I never had to. Like, they took care of their business. So if they're taking care of their business, I don't really care if they, like to paint their faces on senior night. Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. But when you're spending 2 hours, 3 hours painting your faces on senior night, but your music stinks, then I got it. Then now I got a challenge,
Yeah. No, that's
So
awesome. Drew, I love all of it. And I do want to ask about your performance career and the social entrepreneurship you're doing. But I have one more marching band related question.
sure.
Well, it's not exactly marching band, but it's such a good example of it. And it goes back to what you had said about ego. And with a lot of the performances that you find in music, they're a combination of the musical art form and the visual art form. And that's on like a wide array of, it could be from like ballet to, or just like on the visual side, like miming even, or like dance without music, all the way to like a listening room where you're playing modern jazz and everyone's sitting and there's no dancing going on, and it's all just about experiencing the music, right? And so often, since I'm used to that listening room mentality, there will be examples of just people in your life where it's like, I don't know, like a pop concert or something where there's a lot of performance and dance going on, and it's like, this is the best music ever. And my ego steps in and is like, well, so much of this art form is like visual based, so it's like, it's so hard for me to stomach that statement, um because if looking on the spectrum, like it's really far on the visual side. And the more I'm aware of that, I think it's making it easier to just understand of like, these are just different things, we can't compare them to each other because they're just on different parts of that. But when you're trying to teach music and musical concepts and awareness in a marching band framework that is so visual based, how do you approach that? Or even, I mean,
I,
just like the performance part of Pit,
okay, there we
of
go.
just
Okay, there we go.
the
I'm trying to narrow
visual,
it down.
yeah, of how much
Um,
goes into the show and how that affects like the musical awareness
okay, sure.
or health of the
So
students.
so there's three things to me, and I've been thinking a lot about this lately on what makes a technique a good technique. Like,
Okay.
what's good technique? Because you
Mm-hmm.
could, you ask Warren Wolf, and he's like, he'll tell you he's never taught any of this. He never talks about technique with his kids. He doesn't care. It's not even a thing he thinks about. You watch him, I can watch Sasha Berliner plays on the second knuckle, clamps down, and plays. Christian Timbre holds his left hand mallet almost halfway up and has a completely different approach with his left hand than he does with his right hand. And so I'm watching, but I mean, all of these players are killing. Like musically, if you close your eyes and you listen, it doesn't matter, right? They're making the music
Mm-hmm.
sound right. So it got me thinking so once you get to a certain level, like play, you're doing what you're doing. But as an educator, we have a responsibility to kids, right? We have to help them to be able to prepare them and to teach them how to play and how to do that. So I've been thinking a lot, and I think that a good technique must check three boxes. Like, and if it doesn't check these three boxes, and there could be more. This is me in development on this thought, but as I've thought so far, I welcome any challenges to this because I want to understand it better and I want to know it better. So, and those three boxes are: it has to create beautiful sound, has to facilitate you making wonderful sound, it has to keep you in good health, it has to not, it has to be able to help you build endurance, play organically, holistically, and healthy, and it has to help you to have a high skill ceiling, which means by learning this fundamental technique, you should be able to play whatever music exists as you continue to develop it. Example of that is, if you're playing Mary Had a Little Lamb nice and slow, you could probably play it any sort of way, hold it however you want. You could play it backwards through whatever fingers, only play with your two fingers. Doesn't make a difference. If I brought my 7-year-old in here, well, she has pretty good technique. If I brought, when she was 4, she could play it in whatever way she could play it. And so you may say, and you can run into this, you think about students you've taught, you run into this too. It's like, hey man, you can't play this like this. Even on drum set, whatever, you got to relax, you got to play your cymbal here. Well, I don't like it here. I like it way up here. I like playing it here. I like my toms all the way around here. And it's like, well, that's fine for the level you're at now. But once you start playing faster, or once you start playing harder music, like this technique, you'll have to take 2 steps back to learn and unlearn. Your muscles have to unlearn the stuff you just learned. So that's what I mean by high skill ceiling. Like, there's stuff you could play, easy stuff can be played almost in a variety of different ways and approaches. See Yellow After the Rain, that you see kids playing all over the place, just kind of sort of playing it how they want. But once they get to that next level, they won't be able to do it. And then good health. It has to be able to keep you playing forever. And this is where marching band oftentimes, a lot of times fails. Getting better nowadays with more amplification and more things like this, and just a little bit more high-level people kind of coming into the positions of teaching front ensembles. But if you're playing with all wrist to the isolation of all else, because of the fact, and you're playing this aggressive sort of twisted up piston stroke, where it's not literally the piston stroke that's described in Method of Movement, but more of this like aggressive, full energy down, full energy up, isolating your wrists, and then fixing kids, which I see frequently, fixing kids to look an aesthetic, even if that means going against the way their physical body type or physical makeup or larger hands, or you're kind of fixing kids to fit an aesthetic, and you're putting the aesthetic above the health. Now, once you get good sound, good health, and a high skill ceiling, then yeah, worry about aesthetics. Worry about all of these, worry about the way the group plays, the group identity. Worry about the East Coast, West Coast. I don't know if they still use that term, but worry about all of those types of things. But too often are we putting aesthetics and other things ahead of the sound, ahead of the good health, and ahead of making sure that they'll be able to play in different applications for the rest of their life. So a key, we're combining marching bands this year. So I was in front of somebody else's kids, and he hasn't gotten here yet. So I'm teaching my kids with another group's kids, and the guy who's going to be the percussion director or the front ensemble guy hasn't even seen these kids yet. So I'm like, well, I can't give them my approach specifically. I can't go into it and say, this is how you need to play, because in 3 weeks' time, somebody else is going to come in and be like, this is how you need to play, and it's going to mess with them. So I said, listen, my goal today is to help you appreciate your hands, help you appreciate how they work, where your fulcrum points are, how gravity works, how physics works, how your biology works, and appreciate some different things that you can do. Because when you... Can I demo? Is that allowed in a podcast?
Please. It's preferred.
So if I'm honest with myself and not trying to be macho, especially now because I do actually have tendonitis, and I play, like, this is probably like the extent of my wrist stroke. Like if I'm just using my wrist, like this is probably about where it's at. Now I can flex it, but this doesn't feel good. This feels bad. Why do I want to feel bad? And there's a difference between pain that is pointless and pain that leads to growth. Right? Pain that leads to growth is like when you work out, and you work out with good technique and you got that muscle soreness because your muscles are repairing themselves and remembering things. And then the pain that leads to, just sadness and pain, I guess, more pain is kind of the pain that I think a lot of percussionists feel when they get tendonitis. So that's about it. Drum corps to me and these other forms of marching arts, they're like the sport, their application. Like that's a different thing. If you choose to go play their style, that's what you should do when you're with them, if that's what you want to do. But you should know and have the knowledge to know how to do it healthily. Healthily, is that a word? And you should also be able to go back and play your music your way and the way that feels good to you. But that's not, I don't think that's a drum corps' job, especially not a top drum corps. I don't think top drum corps' job is to sit here and even care about half of that stuff. I think their job is they have their job to do, and that's to win, and they win. More kids want to come, they get more money per competition. I mean, they know the game and they must play the game, so, but as high school educators, we have a different responsibility. Our job is not just to win competitions. Our job is to make sure that, and I want kids to be able to go to wherever and become chameleons. Man, I've always wanted to march blue coats. Cool. Well, you know exactly how to play, and you look around and you see everyone's playing, but you're like, done. And you made it, And you make the group because you understand how all of this works. I don't remember what the original question was for. Oh yeah, music. So when it comes to like the expressive stuff and the visual stuff, after that, we always focus on breathing. And so I'll just be like, hey, listen, I want you to breathe in for this phrase and breathe out, but just do me a favor and like sort of exaggerate it a little bit. Just sort of exaggerate the breath, as you breathe, just so that it can be more visible. And just to really kind of drill down in your question and not be so like tangential. I believe that communicating an idea to an audience is of utmost importance. And so, I'll always tell them is like, if you want to yell across the room, your body language reflects the yelling across the room. So if you're going to yell across the room, you're standing like this, hey, you're open, you're big. If you want to whisper in someone's ear, you're not walking up to them like this and be like, hey, I got a secret to tell you. You're
terrifying.
You're right, exactly. You're like, hey, man, come here. I gotta tell you this thing. Your body's collapsed. Like your body language reflects what you're trying to communicate. So if we're playing this super soft idea and you're standing up like this with all this great posture, and you're playing super it doesn't. It's there's a disconnect for the audience. They appreciated what you played, but they don't know why they're not really feeling it, right? So if they're watching you, they don't know that they're listening or what's picking up the emotion. They're speaking from humanity, and humanity involves all of this, right? So you need to involve all of this. Everything you do on this instrument needs to communicate the musical idea, needs to accentuate it. Is it prioritize over sound? No. I don't need you bar sniffing and missing notes. I don't need you, doing all this pulsing, and I don't want to hear tugga 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 tugga, while you're pulsing. I'll pull that stuff out quick. You should never sacrifice the sound or your health or your skill ceiling for any of those aesthetics. But once you have those things, then what else? How can we adorn the music? How can we use all of the tools that we have as humans to communicate this to other people and make them feel something? And so, that's I guess did that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, totally.
All right, cool.
Now, in my life, when someone, obviously you still teach in high school, but
Sure.
when high school educators have moved on to different careers or done other things in their life, normally it's to like go do a tech job or something,
Right.
And you have like mobility in your career while teaching, founded Mallet Lab and like started a touring career playing your own music. And I feel like I don't see that very often. And I'd love to hear, I mean, you talked about the entrepreneurial spirit that your family has, but like how you were able to accomplish both those things and even just to have the drive to continue to develop your own thing, even while you're in a system, doing a job.
So, how much time you got? It's because this kind of does go back and to sort of be early times. And when I figured out this is what I wanted to do, I remember I always try to find any opportunity that I could find to play and to do stuff. So that led me to it was a West Palm Beach Youth Orchestra, a Palm Beach Youth Orchestra rehearsal or audition. And when I went there, I met a guy. Was that an audition? Maybe a rehearsal? I don't remember. But there was a guy playing jazz piano. He was my age, and he was killing. And he was like singing Sinatra, and he was just like, you don't see 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds singing Sinatra and playing jazz piano. And I met the guy, and I went over to him, and I said, man, we should get together and we should play. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So we got together, and what formed from that, man, was the coolest little collaboration. We knew he knew a couple tunes. I knew one scale, maybe. I don't know, maybe two. I think like D minor and maybe B flat major. Jazz wise, I think I knew it a 7 chord. I don't know. I think I was playing blues scales for everything for my first couple months. And once we worked up a couple tunes, we worked up like 7 or 8 tunes out of the real book. As a duo, I said, let's go get gigs. And so I lived in a suburb and in Boca Raton, and there were these strip malls, but really nice ones that had just gone up around. And they were pretty filled up at the time. They hadn't just gone up. They'd been around for a minute. And what I did was I went to every single door and I asked them if they wanted music. I didn't care if it was a gym. I didn't care if it was a lawyer's office. I didn't care if it was an ice cream place, shoe salesman. I didn't care. I just went in and said, hey, you guys want some music here? And obviously, most of them were like, crazy kid. Some of them thought I was cute. But a few of them said, yeah. And so there was a bookstore called Borders Books, and I went there and talked to whoever did the social stuff there. They put me on, and then I would go to these. I remember we were playing at this coffee shop that was there, and sometimes we would just set up in the middle of the courtyard. I didn't really care, but what I told them, I said, listen, I'll play for you for free for the first night, and if you like what we're doing, then give me a month contract and pay us $100. Not $100 each, just $100. I thought $100 is a nice round number. Give us $100 if you think that we're worth it. And so I did that, and this was in 1995, right? 96. So 96, I would say. And so there wasn't social media and social media blasts. I called everybody from my landline and guilted everyone. Oh man, it's the only time I would tell them always my first show, and I'd add, you got to come out, and I'm just doing the show. I don't know when I'll play again, but can you please come out? It just means a lot to me. And people will come out, and they'd have a good time. They'd leave me tons of tips and eat tons of ice cream and have tons of coffee, and people, and they loved us, and I would get a month here, maybe 2 months, and I just that led to other things and emboldened you to do other things. Then I could drive. Then I got a car, then I could drive, and then I was playing 8 nights a week. It was 8 shows a week. I guess you can't really play 8 nights a week. 7 nights a week, and a brunch gig on Saturdays. Like, we would. I remember there was a time when I was doing 4 shows a day. I would do a brunch. I would do a early, like a happy hour cocktail, like a happy hour. I do like a 8 to 10 or 8 to 11 thing, and then I would go. We'd be down in South Beach, and we'd get like jazzed from like 1 a.m. till 3 a.m. And then, by the time I was 18, like that was. So school was like, oh yeah, I got to go to school. So school to me was always just, work to me was always like, I never didn't work. That's just what I did. And as soon as I got out, someone told me about this whole percussion teaching thing, and I got a job at Piper High School in Fort Lauderdale. It was a very, very, there's a fight there every day. It was a rough school. But we got and then I kind of got hooked on that. I felt that I was pretty halfway decent at doing that. So I stuck with that too. And from that moment on, I was always doing like the percussion director, percussion tech thing. And I would tech everywhere. I had like 3-4 percussion tech jobs. I was gigging, all the time, and trying to go to college at FAU and deal with all of that stuff. So to me, I never waited for a phone call to have an opportunity. I never had that luxury. And so there'll be times when we're talking about career, I'm having this kind of conversation, or I'm having this, especially if I'm at a clinic, especially at a university clinic, where people will ask, like, what do you think about the scene? Is there work out there? Things like that. What do you do about when the call's coming in? And I say, well, what do you play? And they'll tell me like bass or drum set or piano. And I'm like, you're not getting phone calls. If you're a bass player, you're not getting phone calls. You probably need to hit the shed or get yourself out there a little more. But as a vibraphone player, and I'm kidding, don't get triggered on me, bass players I'm playing. Not,
there's some truth to that though, because not a lot of bass players.
It's a little bit. I always need a bass. Everyone needs a bass player. But as a vibraphone player, no one's calling me. Like no one's like, and I'm not saying people call, like nowadays people call, but like coming up, like no one called me to play vibraphone. Even still, like if I get phone calls, it's mostly like, it'll be well, no, I guess now people call me to play vibraphone, but for a long time, it was, hey, can you play drum set on this gig, or hey, it's a musical, or we got this orchestra thing, or it's a wedding band thing, and still maybe I'm playing congas, or maybe I'm playing background vocals, or maybe I'm playing kit or something like that. But to be called to do what I do and play vibraphone was a rarity. And even now, you talk to the best of the best. They're usually the band leaders, vibraphonists. Very few sidemen that I can think of, and I know that there are some. Marcus Hill always has a vibe player in his bands, and Christian McBride has Warren Wolf in his band, and so I mean it happens, but those are few and far between. So I've always had to make my own opportunities. I've always had to be the band leader. I've always had to learn how to get the shows. And so when I was kind of sick of playing all the restaurant gigs and didn't like that, and saw where that was going to go in 5 or 6 years, and didn't see an out, I knew I had to kind of make a jump. So it was a pretty transitional life change for me anyhow. So I said, you know what? I want to play a show, and I'm trying to think make sure I do this in the correct order. And I was on the board of directors at a theater. I'm now 30-ish at this time. And I said, hey, I want to do a show here. I want to do a show. And they're like, well, we have our season, and their season was all touring acts. It was a big theater. It had about 450. They do some pretty big shows. They'll bring in like the Chicago Road Show and things like that, whatever they can handle. And I said, so what I want to do is I'll rent it. I'm going to rent it. And I said, but I don't want you to market it renting, because I understand you don't want to take a chance on me. You don't know what I can do. You've seen me, I'm playing all over town all the time. So you're like, how can you fill a big theater? And I said, well, I'll rent it. And they said, okay, cool. I said, but I don't want you to I want you to market it just put it on your calendar. You don't have to market it. Just put it on your calendar with this other list of national touring acts. That's all I want. Okay, cool. Put it on the reprint. Awesome. And I booked it for a year and a half out. And I stopped playing everything. And I got, unless it was a private show or it was like a concert where I was like on stage where there was sound guys, like a festival or something like that, I didn't play it all anymore. So people couldn't come see me for free. And so people would start asking eventually, like, "Oh, where are you playing next? Where are you playing next?" "Oh, I'm not. I got a big show. I got a big concert coming up in about it. We're really working on some big things. Where are you playing next? Where are you playing?" "Oh, I'm not. right now. Where are you playing?" And it was rough. I had to get a couple side jobs. I worked for my brother a little bit. I did some other things. So I was teaching a ton of lessons. I just like doubled down on lessons, and that's all I was doing really. So, and it was rough because you get addicted to this, and so it's kind of like its own drug. But for a year and a half, I didn't. And about 9 months to a year later, people were just like, "Dude, when are you playing?" And then I dropped it and started launching it. I said, "Hey, I got this concert coming up." And by this time, it wasn't like "When can we see you play at this restaurant?" or "Where can we see you?" It was like, "Oh man, Drew's got a concert coming up. Cool." The tickets were there, and I started pushing this because it was the only thing I pushed. I pushed nothing else. I booked nothing else before it or after it. It was the only thing I talked about. And we sold out. And we standing room only. And from there it was like, "Oh, Drew's a concert player now." And since then, that was it. We just but it took that risk, and that's a risk that a lot of people aren't willing to take. That's a little time, it's a little step back to go and do that. Now, is that always a path? No, but do some people just sort of like build up their career? But I wasn't in a position I didn't want to leave and just kind of go on really broke tours and sort of like grind my way through it and try to build it. I wanted to build that groundswell here and then move. But there's a lot of risks that we're taking. Mallet Lab, but I've never ever thought to myself, and this is something that I've never ever thought to myself that something wasn't possible if I really, really wanted to do it. It's never occurred to me. Mallet Lab, I had a partner, Eric Rucker, wonderful human, very, very pragmatic as a musician, very organized, the most left brain musician, if there is such a thing, overgeneralization, right? But the most left brain musician I've ever met. Worried about the financial aspect. How are we going to get this? How are we going to work this out? Meanwhile, I'm pie in the sky. Like, let's have 35 marimbas there, 5 octaves. Let's get all of them. And he's like, "Well, how are we going to get them?" So when I first brought the idea to him, he was like, "No, people aren't going to want to come. They might not want to show up." And I'm like, "No, people will figure that out. Like, let's just go." And the first year we did Mallet Lab, in 2017, we had 17 kids from three or four states, I think. The second year we did it in 2018, we had 55 kids from 3 continents, 14 states. Same with the third year. But the first year, I begged, borrowed, and stole every instrument. I didn't steal anything, but I begged and borrowed from every school that I knew. I leveraged every contact. We rented the U-Haul. We tooled around. We borrowed stuff from the indoor programs. I had started a theater in 2010 because I thought I started a nonprofit theater in 2010. I left it in 2015 because I didn't like the bureaucracy of working nonprofit stuff that was funded by city dollars. That's a whole nother podcast. But the person who had been there after me, we were really close, and she let me use the place for a percentage. And all the teachers that were there my first year, I had good relationships with. I knew what I could afford if nobody came to pay them. And I said, if you will do it for this, I will give you this, and then I'll give you a percentage of every kid who walks in the door. And so those people, I'm eternally grateful for them. Was Ivan Trevino, was Warren Wolf, was Matt Hernandez, who was teaching Blue Stars at the time. And I knew I shouldn't have gone down this road and listed them like this, but that was pretty much it. There was those guys and me and a couple local friends, and a couple of interns who were college professors. So and it happened. And once it happened, then it's real. And then now it can only if you're smart and you grow it smart, it can only go bigger. So we got a bigger place. We got a university partner, a private university partner, and we 2018 was great. 2019 had some challenges because it had some challenges, but overall, even that was a great experience. And the idea behind Mallet Lab was because all the camps I felt were either university camps, like you had to, like that was the university, and they were going to teach you the philosophy from that university, or it was personality camps. It was Lee Howard Stevens camp, the Nancy Zelsman camp. It was these, Naboisha's, it was these, like, you're going to come learn from that person.
Mm.
And if you were, and having that, going back to my experience in college of being a jazz guy who liked to play in the back of orchestras and loved drum corps, I knew that mallets, everyone came at mallets in America, especially from a different angle. They came to it as the conservatory guy, or they came to it as the marching person, or they came to it as a jazz person, or they all had these different approaches that was how they lived it. If their high school was marching band and then indoor, then marching band and indoor, and then drum corps, then that was their way they came at it. If their program didn't have a marching band, they were from art school, they were just playing contemporary classical all their life and in the back of orchestras, that's how they came at it. And so I wanted to make a program that was inclusive of all of these different ideas and all of these different philosophies. And I think we succeeded at that. And I know we did, because there's a lot of people who've used that model since then.
Yeah.
Adam Tan, Mark Ford, these guys, his marimba camp is now, that marimba camp happened after he came to us in 18, and it reflects a lot of the same things. And he put his own thing on it, which is what you hope. And then Mark Ford went from this UNT camp that I never heard of. It was like a mallet camp. It was very specific to opening up to all of these different. When Mark came in 2018, 2019, it was all of a sudden, we need all of these different staff members to sort of have this sort of big all-inclusive thing. And I was very careful to get people from each, I guess, to represent each discipline, even though, it's not perfect, right? So I had Matthew Lau came down in 19, and we'd have Warren Wolf, we'd have jazz guys, we'd have the marching guys, like Danny Gutierrez in 2017, can't forget him. Danny Gutierrez, who was, Matt Hernandez, these guys were teaching drum corps. And then we'd have like your more contemporary classical guys like Ivan, who didn't even, in 2017, we were out one time and he looks over at me and goes, "Why does everyone keep talking about playing clean? What does that mean?" Because he'd never done drum corps. And that's a terminology that we use in marching band pretty specifically. It's not something you use otherwise. And he's like, "I've never heard that before, to play clean." Do we joke about that all the time? He's like, "You mean good?" I'm like, "I mean good." So all these different ideas were represented, and I also wanted different career paths represented, so that people could see what's possible, so that kids could come in and be like, "Man." And so we call it Mallet Lab, because the only way you could not do well is if you don't try something new. Like, you don't experiment. Someone didn't show you a technique that you try. Going and doing the last concert and playing very comfortable the way you're used to, and just kind of heels in the ground and not exploring different opportunities of phrasing or technique or approaches would be the only way that you would have failed to get what you should have gotten out of the camp. It wasn't about a perfect performance. It wasn't about like this recital that was going to be amazing. It was about really being exposed to Matthew Lau on contemporary vibraphone, and what does that mean? Like, the guy is killing. Like, what? I never even thought about the vibraphone that way. It's so amazing. What? Tell me more. And kids, you see these marching kids, or Stefan Harris, his approach to harmony, his clinic in 2019 had me in tears. He had a C drone going the whole time from his Harmony Cloud app, and he didn't say a single word in the English language. He just scatted the whole thing. He did not, and he scatted back and communicated, and he brought kids up by scatting and taught them how to. So it was. I get chills just thinking about it. Like, and watching a kid who was playing like this the whole camp, all of a sudden be able to communicate and play a dope line without even knowing what he was playing or why it was beautiful, was just like the most remarkable transformation that I had seen. And it was and those are the reasons why we had it, was just to be able to help to broaden the worldview. Because when I went and traveled to Europe, that's when I realized that I didn't know anything. That my big American exceptionalism, marching band exceptionalism, this is the only way you can play, like this. And I see guys who are coming in playing, traditional grip, blowing my mind with their chops and playing all sorts of different ways that I'd never seen before. Just absolutely, crushing anything I had seen technically before or since, not since, but before that. And I felt like when I came back, like, there was so many kids who were just like, "This is the way you play this way, and this is the only way you do it, and this is how you play the marimba." And I was like, man, you have no idea. And so I've always kind of kept that, and wanted to hopefully open up, have a vehicle to open up the minds of students to be like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that there were so many amazing Mexican composers." Andrea Vinay came and played, oh my god, I can't remember the name, but the little African marimba you sit down and you play.
Oh
And
yeah, I also can't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about.
okay, good. I don't feel so bad. But she played, she played a couple pieces that she had written for it, and kids were like, "Man!" And now there's kids who were experimenting with that and seeing it, and it was just so, um, it was so amazing. And then we scholarshiped. We've always scholarshiped at least five um, young African American students from the area in which we were in. And that was just my personal thing, just coming from the background that I come from. In that, which now apparently, but I never marketed for it. We would reach out to all the educators and ask if they had any exceptional kids with low resources, minority students with low resources that we could bring to the camp, and then we would always do that. At least five. Usually we have seven or eight. So, and so we've always been all about just making sure that that there's a very or at least a relatively represented. But it's always been about excellence as well. So just making sure it's so, and it's just been hard work. I took the year off this year from it just because I gotta I'm just exhausted.
Yeah,
So it takes a lot
I
out of
hear
me to
that.
do, and so I don't force stuff like that, and that's why I feel like I try to put out stuff that's I don't force it. If I'm not feeling it, I'm not super excited. We did it last year virtually, but again we pivoted. It was okay. What can we do that's not being done? Well, it's vibraphones and it's DAWs, it's digital workstations. How can we present a clinic that can add value to the community in a unique way that I can leverage my unique gifts? Because there are a lot of people leveraging, like doing a lot of marimba clinics, and here's how you practice, and here's how you do this, and here's how you compose. Well, those things aren't my unique gifts. But my unique gift is the fact that I play vibraphone, that's unique, and the fact that I know a lot of great vibraphone players who have a lot of great other unique gifts. How can we do this and kind of sort of push forward? And we did. And so it was a very all vibraphone. It was very digital. It was very like here's how you use Ableton. It was very compositional. Sandy Rennick did a clinic on arranging for front ensemble. It was I had some students of mine who were working in Hollywood doing some big time movie scores. They came and walked through a lot of the movie scores they had done and talked about how they create the sounds and how they put it together. So, and I figured that would be more beneficial online, anyhow, in my viewpoint, than here's how you practice, just because. Yeah, so we did it, but this year there's a lot going on. I feel like I need to double down on the school a little bit. And I got hired for a lot of other camps. So it was kind of like, you know what? I'm going to take this year off. And Eric, who is my partner, we kind of split. He's got a lot. He's been doing the whole church music director gig, and that's really going really well and blowing up for him, and it's taking a lot of his time. So he's kind of going another direction. So we're still cool. I love the guy to death. And so now we're just kind of I'm in Georgia now, so we're just kind of figuring out how things go. So I just if it feels good and it really resonates with me, and I know that it's something that I feel truly is needed, and I feel that my unique confluence of gifts can help to add, then I go full force with no, burn my ships at the shore. But if it's not, or I feel like someone else can do it better, or they're already doing it, I'm not just trying to add to the noise necessarily.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. No, and
my
it
long-winded
was
answer to
it
your
was
question.
great for me to hear that. Well, one because as a drum set player, especially in a really healthy gigging scene, at least as far as opportunity in New Orleans, it's like if I am going out and I have facility on the instrument and I have mentors and things like your phone will ring, like you will get work, and and so then I kind of developed this idea of like maybe it's important to do that, as opposed to like making your own opportunities right away. And I forget that I play an instrument that is on most gigs,
Right.
where like sometimes in like your situation, you do have to make that happen. But that's not to say that
But to
you
be to
didn't
be
like.
honest though, no, go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, finish your
Well,
thought.
just to say that I read that like you still take private lessons. Is that the case still?
Oh, anytime I can.
Yeah.
Anytime I can. Yeah, if I go, I mean, yeah. So I take private lessons with Stefan Harris in harmony and piano.
Mm.
Um, and we've kind of since school kind of came back in, we paused. But when we were in pandemic, it was, we started from square one with just harmony and ears and. Does this note sound good with that note and why? And as a human, not because it's a rule, not because it should sound good, but why does this note sound good? And so yeah, I got back to taking lessons on piano. I watch every YouTube thing that Quincy Davis does on drum set because I know how to play drum set. I've listened. I've never really taken very many lessons on drum set. So I lived in such a jazz cave, and I'm a good mimic, so that I understand how to swing. So that gets me through a gig. But once you get past like hour two of the gig, you'll hear a lot of repeated vocabulary. Probably hour one and a half. Because I just don't have a lot of So and also when I'm teaching drum set players, listening to guys like him, I use him because I just love his approach. I never really thought about when you swing, it's that accent on the quarter note, or it's these little things that the hi-hat, how the hi-hat works to make it swing better. I know I can do it. I know what it's supposed to sound like, and I know how to do it. But when I'm teaching somebody else, sometimes I can't troubleshoot them because I never really had that sort of facility. So anytime, like when we were at UNT, like I was hoping we were going to be together at this camp, and I was going to take lessons with him there. But any opportunity that I have to learn and to grow. And just to your point too, what I was going to say was one of the reasons I feel like my career, if it's been any sort of success as a musician, is because of the fact that I really, really try to be unapologetically sincere about what I play and how I play it. I don't try to be somebody else. I don't try to compete with other people. I am genuinely happy when I see another, especially a vibraphone player, gain to prominence, be put up and be put on, because I know for a fact that I have a unique set of gifts that are inherent to me, that are built because of my struggles and my joys and my family and my culture. I have a unique set of passions, likes and dislikes. I have a unique personality, and I have a unique approach. And I say that about every human being on the planet. But specifically, I know that about myself. And I know that when somebody comes to pay for a ticket to see me play, they're coming to hear a piece of me. Mm. They're not coming to hear scales. They're not coming to hear chops. Or C chops. They're coming to feel something. And if I'm me and I communicate me in the way that I communicate, then there will always be people that will love me, and there will always be people that will not like me at all. Maybe they'll hate me. They'll love me or they'll hate me. Very few people, whether it's personality or music, will be like, Drew, yeah, it's all right. Usually people are very one side of the fence or the other side of the fence when it comes to me. And I appreciate that. I know where people stand. I rarely have to worry about, sort of sifting through sycophants or people who just kind of want to be around because they think they can get somewhere or get something that quickly gets weeded out because they don't. But then there's people who absolutely love me, and those people buy tickets. Those people support me, and because I'm me, and it's not because those people that don't like me are wrong or bad. I'm just not their cup of tea. Somebody else could be their cup of tea, and that's the way it should be. But when you try to oh man, this guy's playing these scale, he's playing that music. I love hearing. A perfect example would be like Nathan Skinner, for example. I don't know if you know him, but a killer mallet station player, amazing vibraphone player. Yeah, he's from my hood, a bit younger than me. But man, when I tell you that this guy is killing, like he's so good. Like and especially now that he's gotten hold of the mallet station and really found his voice with the DAWs and the thing. He's a genius, man. I mean, the guy is just, I'm not going to go sit down in a jam session with him on a mallet station if I was in a competitive nature and be like, all right, let's go. Like, that's his. I might do it because I want to learn something. If I do it, it's just because I want to learn. And I'm going to try to play, and he's going to be like, no, man, check this out. Okay, cool. Like, let's do it again. That'll be the kind of kickback, that I would do. But I would never put myself in a situation to be like, oh, you like, somebody calls me and say, hey, man, we really want you, but we love the way this guy plays. Can you play like that? I'd be like, no. It's not going to happen. And I use him because he's just, it's a stark contrast in what he's doing and how he plays and approaches. And but I do everything I can to build him up. I do everything I can to prop him up, to help him where I can with my unique gifts. And for me, I think, like, listen, I set rules for myself in terms of touring, in terms of being away from my kids. I have a 3-week limit, and it's twice a year, period. Like, there's no flexing on that. I can do a week here. You can do 3 weeks at a time. I can do a week and a week, but even that's only 4 times a year. So I have like these very strict rules in terms of how often I'm away from my home and my family and my children. and that is just it. And this is the life that I've chosen. And
Yeah.
that's where I find my greatest joy is being a father and being a family man and a husband and being here with them. So do I sometimes look at cats who are touring all the time and be like, oh, that'd be pretty cool? Sure, but do I? But I quickly go back to what really brings me joy and happiness. I go to what, because you always would have to sacrifice something to do the other thing. So if I want to go and I want that life, well, what am I sacrificing to gain that life? And what am I risking to sacrifice? And if saying, like, someone calls me, and I have gotten a couple really cool opportunities to play with some really well-known groups that would have probably put me in a different financial situation overall, like put me in a different bracket. But I would have been gone for 3 and 4 months, and it was, but I look 2 years in the future, or I look 3 years in the future, I can't get those 3 and 4 months back. If my daughters have challenges that they needed their dad for here at that time, it wasn't a risk I was willing to take. I can't get it back, and no amount of flat screens in the house or an extra bedroom are going to be able to make up for whatever trauma that my child might have, or whatever thing that my child might have had, that they would have needed me for, that they didn't have me for, or if they developed a resentment toward me, or if they got into behaviors that weren't congruent with their best selves because they didn't have me around to help guide them through those challenges. I couldn't have, that wasn't a risk I was willing to take, not for, there's no amount of money. So all that to say that when I see cats doing it who are young and single, or that's the choice that they made, then I honestly, to be totally honest with you, Tanner, I don't think that vibraphone is my gift. This is just my vehicle to do other things. Like, I'm glad I'm able to play it. I love it. I appreciate it. But dude, there are cats who will wipe the floor with me, and I'm fine with that. But there's no one that can be a better me than me when I'm on the instrument. So as long as I keep playing things and notes and sounds that resonate with me, and I keep playing music that makes me feel good, I know I'll transmit joy to other people, and that's why they pay tickets. They want to feel something, and you communicate sadness, joy, love. These are part of the human experience that music helps to define. They don't care if I'm playing vibes, or saxophone or accordion. No one cares. They just want to feel something. And so, but I do have the skill to be able to create opportunities like Mallet Lab and like these theaters that I was able to start, and to be able to build relationships and to be able to help put great people together, and to be able to just to be able to develop those. So there's like a unique set of gifts that I have that I can use to help others who are in a position to be able to help to put the vibraphone up. And when you think about this shirt didn't happen because I wanted a cute brand. It happened because how are the students that come behind me, or my kids, if they choose to play this instrument, going to have any easier time than me if people don't even know the name of the instrument? Like,
Fair enough.
they're not.
Yeah.
They're not. Like, so if someone's like, oh, how are they going to, oh man, I really want to hear that one instrument, the xylophone, and people are like, oh, well, we don't know any xylophone players. But I'm like, no, the vibes are beautiful. I love the vibes. I heard the vibes. It's not a xylophone. It's the other instrument. And then you have these conversations around it, and it sparks these conversations. I mean, people come up to me and joke with me all the time when I'm wearing the shirt or not. Like, hey, man, it's not a xylophone. You playing the xylophone? I go, little do you know that even by just that joke and your awareness of it, I have won. Like, we have, the culture has won, and my students are going to have a slightly easier time than I had if they choose to play this instrument and fall in love with it. So that's overall. So if there's somebody that I can prop up, that's in a position to be on, then I want to prop them up. I want to use every resource that I can, to do that if I can be of value, and that's and I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. I love playing. I want to play. I love playing concerts. I love being on the road with my people, with my tribe. But that's not what's most important to me, and I'm not willing to do it if it's going to sacrifice my core values or make me have to be anything less than myself. So,
Drew,
so
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I love that you know what you stand for and that you're built a life around it. And I feel the passion, and everything you're doing is just incredible.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate this podcast too, man. I mean, you've had a lot of. I think you had Sarah on here too, right? Sarah.
Yeah.
Thar.
Yeah, Sarah Thauer and
homie,
Sasha,
man.
you had mentioned. And man,
Sauce is
Stefan
dope.
has come up more than anyone, and I will have him on here eventually.
He'll do
It'll
it.
it'll happen. Yeah,
If
I
he,
just gotta.
I have a Zoom call with him on Monday, so I'll mention it to him.
Oh, that would be huge.
Yeah, him and him
I've
and
I met him at Gen and ran it by him, and he seemed into it. It just hasn't worked out with his schedule, but
yeah,
he's
he's a hard one to get
incredible.
in. He's a hard one to get in touch with. I'm gonna tell you a quick story that kind of led to this sort of mindset that I have that kind of came from him.
Yes,
Um,
please.
it was 2004. It was 2015. They had just announced the PASIC people who got onto PASIC, June, and I had applied for 3 categories or 2 categories. I got none. By the way, I've never been accepted for PASIC. I am on the keyboard committee now, though.
Nice.
So whatever. Um, so I, I'm there, and it happened to be in the studio tracking drums for the worst. But let me just put it this way: it was just guitars, and no one used a Met, no one used a click track. They weren't very good. They just were older guys that had money and wanted to make a record.
Perfect.
And at the time I was like, yeah, I'm not going to turn that down. And I usually don't say no to stuff like that. I usually just charge a lot of money so that
Mm-hmm.
if I don't want to do it, and they say yeah, sure, they didn't even blink. I was like, oh, okay, so I'll do it. So I'm there with my buddy. He's like, so we wanted to make it good, and so we're cutting it to try to make it line up. We're filling in guitar parts, like but it was so bad. Like it was really not good, Tanner. It
Okay.
was really. Usually, I only care about authenticity, but
But there's a line.
there's a line. But you know what? And at the same time, the money was enough, so we were just having fun with it. We wanted to make these guys sound good, so we worked
Okay.
pretty hard at it. I'm actually pretty proud of the product that came out of it, although we burned them all. Anyway, and so it's late at night. We're looking at this, and the PASIC results come out, and I didn't get it, and I see that all the Mallet Tech, and at the time I was with Mallet Tech, all the Mallet Tech guys had got it. Joe Log, Warren Wolf, Tony Maselli, Stefan Harris. And so they do this big vibe Saturday night thing. And I was the only, at the time, like the only other vibraphone player on Mallet Tech, and I wasn't on that roster. So I was like, wow. And now couple that, holding the bag, didn't get accepted. All of my peers got accepted. And I'm sitting here looking at my life right now, recording this really not rewarding music. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Okay.
like, my life is it's pretty terrible. Like I hate it. So I call Stefan. I call Stefan and say, hey man, listen man, totally cool. He's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, hey, man, you got on that. That's cool, mate. Hey man, let me sneak on? Let me get on that too. He's like, yeah, I don't think it's gonna work that way, dude. And I'm like, oh no, I know, it's cool. But hey man, maybe I'll just sneak on. He's like, all right, man, I gotta go, and just kind of hung up. And it was like the most like I was like, oh my gosh, now I have no friends. Stefan doesn't like me. No one wants to play with me. This music isn't rewarding. This is my life from now on. This is so terrible. It was a rough night for me. It was a rough night.
Mm-hmm.
And so the next day, Stefan calls me. And he goes, hey, man. I go, oh, hey, what's up? He goes, did you call me last night? I was passed out. He's like, but I kind of remember talking to you. And I saw it. Then I saw it on my phone. So I'm like, I guess we talked last night. And I go, oh my God, he was sleeping. Oh, thank God. Because I thought he was just like, yeah, man, I gotta go. He's gonna hung up on me, and I was like, oh, I'm annoying. How am I gonna repair this relationship? He thinks I'm just out for some. It was bad. I was going down the rabbit hole.
I know
of
the
negativity.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and he goes. So I told him. I just told him what's up. I said, yeah, man. I saw this, and it's how I felt, and this is what I was doing, and I was playing this music that wasn't rewarding for me, and now it's like my third or fourth time applying for PASIC. I didn't get it. And then all you guys are on it, and this is a rare moment. I'm usually, by the way, man, I'm usually like, let's go, let's keep moving. Like I have a good relationship with rejection and criticism. So that has been developed over time. So it usually doesn't really get to me, but this one just happened to. It was just the combination of all the things in orbit. And so he says to me, man, listen. He goes, it's a really dangerous thing to want what anybody else has. He goes, it's a real, and now this is a primary function you teach your kids at a young age. Don't envy people. Don't jealousy. I mean, it's these things, fundamental things, have been around forever, and I knew that. But the way he put it to me, he's like, it's really dangerous, man. He goes, listen. He goes, you're and at the time I was heavily into my nonprofit work in 2015. I just opened up another theater I was working as a cultural arts director for a city. So, he's like, man, you're building opportunities for young African Americans, for our people. And by the way, these are always the communities. They're always in diverse communities. I never did this in like ritzy downtowns. Well, downtowns, but they had to be like bordering somewhere so we could offer opportunities for minorities.
Okay,
And
yeah.
he's like, man, what you're doing is wouldn't know the first thing about how to do that. He goes, I know cats who play and are on tour all the time, and they're on their fourth marriage. So you look at things that people have, and the ultimate thing was like, you have that unique combination of gifts. You need to maximize those. Don't worry about what anybody else has. And it was one of the most encouraging conversations. And Zhivkovich years ago had told me about his experience with a lot of at the time, I guess, kind of a lot of Japanese players were sort of becoming way more world renowned at younger ages. There were technical monsters like in the 80s and stuff like that, and he was ready to give up because he's like, I can't compete technically. And I think I don't remember who he told him, but someone told him, he's like, man, no one can be a better you than you. And which is why you hear songs like Ilyashu, you hear songs like these very Serbian, that reflect his experience, because he really leaned into those tonalities and those things, because that's him. And so that no one can be a better you than you philosophy, for me, has been something that has honestly just helped me to celebrate everybody. And like, I'm a fan of you doing this podcast because this is something that you're using your gift, your perspective, to not only share with others but to help upbuild the community. And I think it's admirable. And for me, I'm a little bit more direct on both sides of the coin in terms of how I feel about. I embrace, what you're doing. I could not do from your perspective. I could take a different perspective. But if I tried to be like, hey man, I love what he's doing, I'm going to do a happiness podcast and call it the Joy Percussion. It wouldn't be sincere. No one would care because it's me trying to, be a contrived version of what you're trying to do. So I'm a fan of what you are doing because of the fact that it's authentic and you can tell when you're talking about it, when you're typing about it. I thought I ordered a shirt from you, by the way. Maybe I did.
Oh, yeah?
I need to.
Okay, yeah.
I might have gotten as far as checkout, and maybe I was like, oh, I want to come back to this, and I forgot. But there were some really cool shirts that I wanted to order for my girls and for myself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there is merch, and I
I love it.
appreciate someone plugging it that isn't me. So.
Oh no, I love it. I think it's great merch. It's quirky. It's cute. It's something that I would totally, it's tattooable. It's great. And I love your page, and it just seems authentic, and it doesn't seem seems like an extension of who you are and what you do. To the point where you told me when you had a gig, I was like, oh, he plays. Because obviously you play now that I think about it, but for some reason, like, this to me I just kind of figured that you were, I don't know what I thought, like, but it's very authentic. And I think when you see Sarah Thar is so authentic, unapologetically authentic. And I think it's tough to be authentic in this climate that we're in nowadays, where you're worried about saying the wrong thing and you're worried about messing up or people calling you out for stuff. And
Definitely.
there's a lot of there's a little bit of a contrived. There's people looking for social capital by tearing other people down, which is just an extension of the vibing culture and stuff that happens in the practice room. And so it's a little tough to be authentic. So when someone gets to be authentic, it's nice to be around them. It's nice to see it happening. It's nice to, because no matter what, even though you're talking about joy and happiness, it's still a risk.
Yeah.
It's still a risk. So
I feel that way, and you definitely have that authentic energy, and it's just been a pleasure to talk with you. I so appreciate the time and perspective.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. And if you want to put people in the plug zone, if you have any projects or things you want them to be aware of, where to find you online, now's the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look up, it's not a xylophone on anything. It's my website. It's not a xylo on Twitter because I couldn't fit the E, and it's not a xylophone was not cool. So it's not a xylo on Twitter. It's not a xylophone on Facebook, YouTube. At my website, moutlab.com too. We're a little bit of hiatus right now, just while we recharge. But I am doing the American Percussion Seminar. You said it's dropping Monday, so I don't know. It might be too late for that. But I'm also doing the Pacific Music Institute online seminar with some great musicians like Viola Kid and Jake Shimabukuro, who plays ukulele. He's teaching on that one too, and that's in July. Um, and I'll be on tour. Like, so just kind of check me out. So I have like a tap music project with Sarah Reich in Orlando. We'll be there in July, and then another dance music directing gig with another dancer in September in Tampa. And if you guys are in South Florida and you're watching this, then I'll be at Arts Garage. On Anyway, I'm all over the place. Check my website.
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
I will be getting new merch back in soon. A lot of people have been asking me about these shirts. There are a few left at Lot Riot, but we'll be getting some more and some cool stuff in soon because I'm getting enough. I actually am out of them. This is like a worn in one. I gotta make some so I can have some.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, man.